Welcome to the next Donald Trump drawing here. You can see we started with the drawing already, just diving right in. I didn't want to bore you guys with the SketchUp. And, that could take, I think one of the last videos, it took a while. So we're just diving right in here. It was a really nice profile, and I thought they would work really well. I'm just diving in here with the yellow because I think we could say orange man, but yellow, he's got quite a bit of yellow undertone. And this was a really colorful piece. And that might have been a bit of a mistake. I'm going to just forewarn you that it gets muddy. It gets layered and muddy and wild. And there was this kind of big effort towards the end to drag it back into normalcy. So stay tuned. But we're getting started here. And the cool thing that I learned in some of the previous attempts with these paint markers, which same paint markers, love these things. They've been really good so far. In doing this, learning how to use them more effectively, and I think I learned a lot. And they say you learn a lot through failure. Yeah. So I did. I think this was in all cases and purposes, this was probably generally a failure. I would chalk it up there. Not the whole thing, not immediately. You may be looking at this, and there's certain points, like especially early on, where you're like, "What are you talking about? This is a failure." Like you just said in the last video, to just keep working it. This is going to be a great example of maybe overworking a piece, and it's sometimes really hard to know that you're doing that in the moment. Right now, we can watch and say like, well, you're just getting started. How would you know that? It's like, well, I'm recording this after the fact, so giving you a little, stay tuned, and you'll see, and maybe you can spot the point. I'd love for you guys in the comments if if you think there's a certain point where it is overworked, or like where would you have stopped, or please let me know. I think it'd be fun to crowdsource that. Trying to just let this go. It is a longer, I guess, piece because I just kept going. Try to use a few more colors. Try to stay away from black again, which was somewhat hard to do because there was a few shadows, and without a strong, darker palette in this marker set, it really becomes a lot of these mid-tone warms. I didn't want to go and throw in too many other colors. It doesn't have a lot of green in his skin or anything like that, so we're going to stick with these tans and peaches and yellows, a little bit of orange, some browns. And he was doing this really weird thing with his mouth. You can see his mouth, it's kind of like mid-talk, and he's like pushing out. His lips are way in front of his teeth and his jawline. It was a bit odd. And normally, whenever I'm looking for a portrait to draw, I want to find the version of that person that looks very much like that person, like the character of that person almost. And believe me, there's photos where it's from the side or it's from the back, or it's a weird expression on their face that doesn't really look like them. You'd have to know the context of that person. And at least right now, one of the good parts about drawing Donald Trump, or certain people in the current administration, is they're on TV a lot. People know what their face looks like. So if you're going to draw Trump or Robert Kennedy, Jr., or you're going to draw Scott Bessent or certain people, they've been in the news, they've been in congressional hearings, they're around, you kind of know their face. So it's a little bit easier to draw different angles because there's just a cultural understanding of what they look like a bit more. So Trump has that, even if he's got kind of a weird movement with his mouth. So you'll see it kind of starting. It's not super muddy yet. We're only 5 minutes in, and it's we've lost, all the shapes and things that I previously put down with the pencil. We've lost a lot of that in the cheeks. Now we're just going on color representation, and hopefully we can make that continue to work. I'm going to tell you, it devolves quickly into chaos, and I debated even whether keeping the drawing at one point. Do I really waste everybody's time on this? And I thought, hey, if you're here, if you wanted to see it, maybe it's good to see a drawing that wasn't a clear-cut winner. Maybe that'd be helpful, especially for people coming up, drawing. They're just getting into it. Maybe they need to see something that's not perfect, and I would definitely say this qualifies as a non-perfect drawing. And you're gonna have that. I expected that with some of these. Not every drawing comes out exactly like I want, and there's definitely some opportunities for improvement, especially when you're dealing with new media, dealing with new angles. It's bound to happen, and so I'm not immune to it. I don't think any artist really is. The artists generally don't want to show you all their mistakes. There's a lot of sketchbooks filled with maybe some crappy drawings or some poorly painted things, and they'll just paint over it and they'll just get rid of it. And then we have this cultural thought that, oh, they don't make mistakes, real artists don't make mistakes, they don't use erasers or whatever. It's like, yeah, they do, everybody does. And as I'm talking to younger artists, I think it's really important to not hide the fact that you're going to have some air balls, you're going to have some bad shots. So here, I think, did I realize I'm painting with the same one again? Maybe I want to put more down. So yeah, that you can see that pink gets a little strong, and now we're kind of getting some stippling that worked really well in a previous drawing, and it may not work as well here. And that red comes in super saturated, strong, like that. There's a really intense, there's an intensity to that red. And the thing that I'm going to find out is the more you put down, the more it kind of messes with things. So yeah, we'll see. I'm kind of using red as a shadow, and maybe that becomes a problem, because I probably want to use it, down here, and then now he's got this like blood neck, like looks like drips or something. It's just stop putting the red in. Yeah, can't help it. He does have a red tie, so I do throw in the red tie. There's a lot of subtle reds, probably like a beautiful silk tie, so it's shiny. And I don't have a lot of red to work with there, and I don't want to make it a pink tie, so we'll just splash in all the red. And I wonder if we're going to go blue next for yeah. Sometimes it's helpful when you already put a lot down, just to take a break, let that dry a little bit so you can work on top of it. So while we let the face dry, we can then start throwing in some of the blue. And I think you're going to see how well this covers, because I think I splash it in there pretty quick and try to fill the area. So yeah, it's a lot of area to cover with a blue. Typically, I would go get a bigger blue marker, but it wasn't that big, and I want to see how these pens would do. The paint flows pretty well. You can see a few of the lines. I think that's just like more of the drying. And then as you're using it a lot, you'll see it gets a little chalky at the end, a little dry, but it quickly came back. So I was really impressed with how that filled. Now we have a blue. We just have this big blue shoulder. You can see it dry up there pretty quick. Paper's relatively absorbent. So now we have a drier face to go back in on if we want to. And we can work the shoulder a little bit as we I started to feel out some of the tonal values of this drawing / painting, and there's some highlights in a suit. It might be nice. I want to try out some of these other blues because I didn't have big opportunity before. So put in some highlights. There's just a little bit on a suit. Trying to figure out if this is the color of a suit, or and the other one was a shadow, or if this is the highlight. Even though it's not the portrait, it kind of grounds the portrait by adding the suit in. So I want to make sure we have that set up. And are we going even lighter? Probably going lighter. Once again, coverage is really good on these. They go over light colors go over the top of other darker colors pretty well. So I can not complain about that. Very excited. And I think that the cool part is we go in, I think I'm grabbing a purple. Get my arm out of the way here. I had these in front of me. Man, struggle bus, these purple. They're kind of stuck in this little plastic holder. So you gotta pop them out. It's a tight fit. And they're kind of wedged in there, so you gotta get them out of there. Here we go. I think I used purple before in the previous drawing, and it worked out really well. And I liked it as an alternative for black because it did something else with the value. It dropped some things back, so I like that. It gave more tonal depth without throwing black. And once again, super limited color palette. That's pretty much the cool colors right there. The 3 blues and that purple. And then here, yeah, we have our subtle shadow with the silver. Also helps clean up some of those edges in certain corners. So it covers really nicely over the top of something that may have been the edge of the brush, so there wasn't enough there. And this is a quick recenter of the drawing. So you can see his face looks really blotchy now. His nose looks kind of flat and weird. And his mouth is quite a bit to be desired. I think where his neck comes up from his collar, like it's established that that's in shadow, but there's still lighter parts underneath. And his ear looks really kind of blotchy. So we got some work to do. And then here we come back with that raspberry purple, which is just a nice brown, really. So now we're going to add in some shadows. The sad part is it's like reinforcing the shadows I already have. So therefore it gets a little bit more muddy. And I'm probably missing that mid-tone dark that can transition and still put his neck in shadow, but not go black, and then also transition nicely into the foreground. So this is where if I was drawing with pencil or graphite, charcoal, whatever, Conte, you could work that. It could be a really easy kind of movement of the medium. You can even just blend it with your finger or whatever, and you could get a cool transition from the bottom of something on the side, kind of like 3/4, and then like fully on the side. It's super easy to get that transition. Now, in this case, we don't have that, and we have to be really careful with how much ink goes down, because this is going to fly out of that tip really quickly. Once again, I like these paint markers. They're a lot of fun. It might do better with a bigger size. I think here his portrait was a little smaller than the one that I previously did, so you're going to have to think of size of your canvas and also the complexity of the color ranges inside of what you're doing. I will say the the drawing was probably bound to struggle based on the color palette of the photo. There must have been a different light, or kind of two different color light sources, or some color bouncing off some things. And so it could even be potentially, that there is makeup in certain situations, that he may have like a little bit of foundation or something on that dulls his skin. And they do that, all kind of newscasters and everybody does that so that they don't look shiny or sweaty on a camera. So sometimes they put like a foundation to dull it, and that doesn't always go back to the sides of their face. And so there was definitely a yellow undertone in the front, and then on the side it really went towards pink, and there's just some different colors there. So actually I really like how this orange is serving as that transition between the browns, the reds, and the yellows. So I think the orange was a good idea, and it helped create that transitional from shadow to highlight. So you can see me trying to use it in different places because it was starting to feel right. And there may be probably overusage of it. We'll see. He did have these, kind of the crow's feet or whatever next to his eyes, and so that created these small exact shadows that were hard to represent. So then they become maybe overdone. Yeah, anytime I see this going on for too long, I'm starting to get worried, because now it's going to flatten out again, because that color then kind of becomes consistent across the whole piece, and now that what used to be a good tone for a certain area is now becoming the same across the whole thing. And that's where I as I look at this, I see the trouble. I see where it was really working well, and then you can see up by the cheek in his side of his eye and that part of his nose, all that flattens out then. And you really want to have his nose push further back, and his other eye on the other side push further back, and his cheek come more towards you. So we'll see. I think this is the white. Is it a white or is it tan? I don't know. I think it might be the white. So we'll see, if this can pop some things. But once again, just like when we were doing the blue suit, we're gonna lose a little bit of the stickiness of this color, because I think the colors underneath are still wet. So as soon as this part back here in his hair, fine. A lot of it's pretty dry. There hasn't been a lot of color back there. Some of it's just still the original paper. So we're doing fine back there. But now we're gonna go into an area that's probably has, on his face, it may already have 5 to 6 layers already on it. And so it's going to sit a bit different. And it's going to be overlapping. I did want to pop his teeth here. That felt good. Like the teeth fit in there nice. There's just too many. I'm thinking now there's too many details, and the portrait was too small to allow this size of the tip to work well. And yeah, it's parts of this are working out nicely. I think this is going to become a similar problem. That ear is huge, and I don't know if the shape of the ear and the creases and the nuance of that ear is being represented really well with the size of this brush. And maybe it's, you could say, oh, it's getting painterly, but it still needs more definition, needs some more shadows. And the more we touch it, it's actually pretty good. The white pops some things. We still have some other areas that are flat though. Like the side of his cheek, this temple region, it's still kind of flat. So let's see where we go from here. We're back with the yellow, and this might make sense to kind of come over the top. I think we're going to hit every color almost twice on this. So this is a highlighter, but not as highlighting as a white. And my guess is we're going to probably put too much in. Let's see. So by adding that yellow right there on the cheek, it fills it in, but it also flattens it out. And now that comes forward a little bit from the nose, but the nose, yeah, we're gonna have to add a little bit more in. Come on. Yeah, contemplating what do I even do. Trying to keep it light, don't want to keep getting it muddy. Yeah, I gotta put something in here for these eyebrows. And now that looks just a little wild there. Jumping around, trying to balance this yellow color out, trying to understand what tonal range it represents. And I come back to this chin a lot, this jowl area. Yeah, we're only 20 minutes in a probably a 40-some minute drawing. So it's, I think with some strategic brushes, we could probably finish this off with one or two more colors, and that would be the focus. Is how do we wrap it up? How do we put in the final pieces to make this look good and simplify it? I think right now it's his neck and his ear pretty expressive. This yellow is getting a little bit heavy-handed, especially with the hair and the face. The cheek really kind of fell back a little bit. It had a highlight before we got rid of it because I think we were just trying to fill in the page. And then I went darker, and maybe this is flattening a lot of stuff. Although it is a darker color, it's this, it's kind of this mocha color. My fear is this helps flatten it out quite a bit. And maybe I'm just throwing it in there as a liberal color. It's cool when it overlaps and it creates this like cornucopia of colors, but like I feel like this isn't. Yeah, it's fine. A little bit of work in the back. Needed it. His hair was only one color with a little bit of white in it. So that feels good. Have a little bit of shadows up front. Kind of highlight some individual hair movement. Looks a little bird's nest in there. That was good. I like that. Help push that back a little bit. Flatten that out. See, and then it just becomes this ubiquitous weird bronzer across the piece. So I would encourage you to think through the color areas in this one. I mean, you can definitely see that I'm staying away from that cheek and temple with a lot of colors because the reference didn't have all the color. So yeah, as we're cruising. Sorry to take a little break. I'm back. We're picking up where we left off. This like mocha, almost wants to be gold, but it's certainly not. Is just getting, I don't know. You think it's getting flatter? I feel like it's getting a little bit flatter. The more we use it in certain places, the more it flattens the drawing out. So just something to think about, like colors for different ranges to help push and pull. Your face, any face is it's in the round, so you want to be able to push things to the back and pull them to the front. It's hard with light sources because it kind of helps you sometimes, but then it can also hurt you. So we know that his neck is underneath, so it should be a little bit darker. We know that there should be shadows underneath his ear, underneath his lips, inside of his mouth, under his nose, under his brows. But then the side of his face has the same shadows that other things do. And yeah, this is where there's probably the point, maybe for the next 5 minutes, where we're oscillating between making it better and making it worse. And this is where you're probably gonna have the same ideas that I did. Man, I don't know if we can salvage this thing. And believe me, there's more that we're gonna do to this ear. This is like a super bright orange. It's almost like a pinky orange, light pink orange thing, and it almost acts as a highlighter. But the hard part is, like, is it highlighting or is it a shadow? In most cases, you probably say it's a highlighter because it's bright, but it's also darker than the yellow, so sometimes it's hard to figure out what that's doing. So here, this is more of a skin tone, like light color, so we should be getting highlights off of this. Not quite as much as a white, but we should definitely be getting some highlights, so we should be able to curb some of the bright, or the shadows, and even some of the brightness from the yellow. We should be able to connect some pieces together. So hopefully this does that. And one of the things with these paint markers, because you can't really get a small line, it may have to come from overlapping multiple lines together to then create a smaller line. So one of the things that could potentially happen with the little wrinkles around his eye is that by adding some other things, we can get a finer line by covering some other things. So yeah, it didn't completely cover, so we get some color coming underneath it. Makes it look pretty muddy. This looks like is this that dark brown, that raspberry brown? Yep. Adding some more shadows, overlapping a little bit more. Sometimes overlapping is great, sometimes it's not. Just got all kinds of stuff going on here. Here we go, we're back on track. And so many distractions in this world today that just drag us away from what we're supposed to be doing. Anyway, a little bit more shadow around his mouth. You can see how easily just that little line just gets amplified and now gets muddy. And it's definitely, and I don't know what I was doing here. This was just wackadoo. There was a hint of color, I think, reflected, and I was trying to, pop his eyes just a little bit more and see if there was something else. It's just a little touch. Not sure it needed it. I'm really looking at the piece right underneath his eye and wondering about that. So here's the silver. So maybe I can make sense of that little bit of teal with some silver. Maybe. Yeah, at this point, we're half an hour in. Thank you guys for sticking around long enough to even see this. We're on a journey now. We're on a journey of self-destruction, of finding our way. I don't know where this journey is going to take us. At this point, it's almost like watching a wreck. Watching somebody jump off jump off one of those high cliff diving things and just hoping it doesn't go really bad. You already know it's not great. You already know it's probably just bad, but you're just hoping it doesn't go too bad. Or it's like watching somebody gamble in the World Series of Poker when you know they've lost. There's no way they could possibly win this hand, and they just keep betting into it. And you just hope they don't lose their whole stack. This is kind of that moment where, how much more do you do? How much more do you do? Is there anything that can save this thing at this point? I guess there could be an argument you just keep working it until it comes back. So if you do overwork something, you can work it back into something that's usable. And I think it's kind of a cosine or a sine wave where there's moments where it's better and then there's moments where it's worse. You just keep working it. You're gonna find the bad spots for sure. You may come upon something that works again, and hopefully you recognize it that time. And I think that's kind of where I'm going. Hopefully I recognize when this goes right and I can just stop. I don't have that much confidence in this drawing at that point. I think we're just trying to do things in hopes that we're going to figure it out. We're going to find, something that's working. Maybe it's a mark making technique. Maybe it's something will occur to us as we're going through that, wow, this makes sense. Let's do more of that. And it'll move the drawing back into a good point. So here we're clearly adding the highlights back into the hair, dulling some of the color, getting some movement with his wild hairdo. And that makes sense. It's not hurting anything. And then I know he's got some pretty wild eyebrows. That, and then there's quite a bit of like highlights on his cheek. Maybe that's working better. Highlights in his ear. Ear's pretty muddy. I don't know if we even, other than that it's on the side of his head, I don't know if we understand that that's an ear, to be frank. We know that there's some shadows. Yeah, this is maybe some of the graphic stuff, making it a little bit more fun. Some of these are for direction. It's nice to have like some directional lines in there, some dots. So this is kind of salvaging some of the graphic nature of it. Don't know why there'd be so many highlights down there. Hopefully we stop. Yeah, that was okay. Don't, whoa. Whoa. Don't need a lot down there. Wasn't bad. Oh, we're just going white everywhere. This might be the last Hail Mary, adding a little bit of white in here. Just doing the final highlights. You'll see that sometimes in drawings where the last thing you put on is the whites to pop it. Make sure that you have the white, the 10% white, because you want the full tonal range if you can get it. So this could be the end, but I know it's not, because I'm staring at a timeline here that says there's more to come. We're going to keep going. Actually, this might have been a good point to stop and just end it there. But we don't do that. We got to keep going. I don't mind the shadows underneath the chin that lead up to the ear. This is a really nice spot. I actually would, in retrospect, I think this would have been a great point to just cap it off. But you know what? In the moment, it's hard to know that. So you just keep going. I think purple could be really cool. I don't think that those lines really help that much. So we'll see where we go. It's definitely a shadow. See if we use it in the ear to help clarify anything. It may just be to put more color in here. So, it's hard when you're working on something and everything goes right. It's hard to know. Sometimes it's really just hard to know. Not that I hate all these marks, but I think I was pretty happy with it. It would have capped it at a 30-minute drawing, and we would have been able to be done. But now we have some more purple. Some of the purple, see, it flattened it out again. So now we have a darker purple. We're putting a super dark purple way high up on the drawing. So now that is the darkest spot on the drawing. And now we're just smattering it in the nose. Now his eyes really dark. Now we have to add some more darks down here to make all that shadow make sense up on the cheek. But we're adding more and more and more. Yep, it just keeps going. This is where you get the, had I started lower on the drawing, I may not have had to go put it in all these places. And now we have, shadow way high up in his hair. And I think at some point it was color, but now it's shadow as well. So these weird shadows. His nose just, it looks very odd. His nostril is just like there. Now we're throwing blue in. Just stop the. Yes, thank you. Man, this is like a fever dream. We're just watching all these. Yeah, we're still going. There will be a point where it stops, but not yet. Okay, so this is at least a little bit of lightness coming in. I do like the graphic nature of some of these lines. It would be nice to fix that front of his nose. His lips, super not happy with the mouth right now, but there are some redeeming qualities. There are some painterly pieces here. It's fun. The layers are starting to work a bit more. So once again, there's probably a point here, maybe dull that weird dark nose spot down and just call it done. Just put a pin in it. We keep flattening out the face. It flattens like the jowl or the edge of the mouth all the way up to the forehead. It just feels a bit flat now. Is this white? So we're highlighting even more. I don't know how many times those lips have gotten highlight. It's a lot. Okay, good. We're doing less and less. Oh yeah. The train wreck continues. That's that brown raspberry color that I've talked about so many times. I think it just comes out so fast. And it just lays down so much color. It's hard to control it. And then there's certain marks, I'll say this too, there's certain marks that just don't need to be made. They can be implied. We can let the viewer fill it in. So there's certain times where we're describing too much. We're doing too much with the strokes of our pen, and we don't need to do all that. Like this just flattens out that whole area. It looks like it's graphic and fun with some dots and some lines and some movement, but it just flattens the whole thing out. And I see that now. Hindsight's great. I see that now, and I probably, it had so much more dimension. The color was more fun, and now we're there. And so like these dark colors, the dark brown, the really punchy red, all these different things are coming in, and they're just creating more, I guess, more things to contemplate and think through. And I don't know if that's really what we wanted, but that's not what we're getting. So now we're oscillating again into this overworked area. We have this like super punchy red. It's like the brightest red lipstick, and we're just splashing on his ears. His mouth is appropriate maybe, but now it's going to be all over his chin. So you have like this bright, super high intense chroma value. It makes sense that there might be a little bit bouncing off his tie that's coming back up, but man, we were close. And then we went to the dark side. This is where it got really fun. I was recognizing that it was getting overworked constantly, and we needed to have some type of value range and even reestablish some of the edges because they were getting lost in all these layers and layers of paint. So here was a an attempt to not put black into the portrait, but to just define the background. And I normally don't put a lot of backgrounds in my drawings because it's just, it adds a lot more complication. Now it's this person in a space, and now we have to think through, as a viewer, what does the space mean? What is them in the space in this particular place? Like, it muddies up the meaning. And instead of just a representation and you staring at this person and their features and their face and it becoming more about them, now it's become about the situation that they're in. So it's less about the person, more about the situation. And wasn't really excited about that. I'm not interested in that in most of my drawings. And you can hear this black was just itching to go. It was very saturated, insanely wet, ready to cover. And you can cover pretty quickly and get a strong black. I think it says acrylic, and this is an acrylic, but it does have a certain marker-esque quality to it. These are my favorite ones so far, but there are moments where I feel like it's a bit of a marker. So here I'm just kind of defining some of that, his wild, kind of wispy hair. And it also helps the movement from left to right. So yeah, here's the thick side brush that really fills some things in. But now we have these lines. And typically I would say these markers have been really good with not including the lines. And that's why I look at this as kind of a marker. It's very wet, and I can see the lines. And maybe, there's going to be people, that are thinking like, well, slow down if you don't want to see the lines. I don't want to take forever. This is already a long drawing. We're 42 minutes in. This is taking a long time, so I want to get this done. Just like your interest, there's the few of you that would ever be this far in the video, your interest is waning. Mine is too. We got to get this drawing done. How do we wrap this up quickly? We're going to move fast. We're going to get this black on there. Just black out the drawing. Get it done. As we're doing that, we're seeing, a lot of different brush strokes. Now we're doing side, the different directional things. It's getting all over the place. Any mark that you make and you put down here is something for somebody to comment on. And if you don't want them to comment on the marks, the direction of the marks, the saturation of the black, then you got to keep working this a little bit more. So one, I wanted coverage with this because it would be consistent. We want a little bit of consistency across the whole drawing. So we filled it in. Look at all those weird marks. Not really what we want. We want the marks and the focus to be on the portrait, not on the background. So one of the things that I talked about in a previous video that I've yet to use is one of those super thick paint markers. And I had it. It was next to me. I could easily, kind of grab it. So I pulled out the whole box. And we're going to fill in this background with a epic black paint marker. So hopefully we will erase a lot of these marks in the background. We will let it become black, kind of shaking it up a little bit. And you'll see you have to prime it. So it's a white tip. It's never been used before. You've got to prime and push that paint or that tip. I think it's called the nib. You got to push that nib up into the black. You got to try and draw it out. And it's not going to flow perfectly the first time. So you got to kind of pull some of that through. And then it creates some like capillary pull. And now you have some black. So this is even better. We don't have to worry about getting so close to the drawing. But we can fill it in with a really thick black. We can have some different... we have a lot of coverage. I don't have to worry as much about the directionality of the mark making. But you can see it's nice and black. Two coats of a black really do quite a bit. And now we have a bunch of different marks in the background. They're overlapping. It should be pretty saturated. And this way it's not close to the same size as the marks of the drawing. So it's doing some different things there, which make me feel a bit better about it. But Once again, this paper is probably not meant to absorb this much liquid or fluid at this time. So the paper is probably going to be a little bit warped. Something you got to watch out for. When I'm doing these, it does tend to work better to work on watercolor paper, because watercolor paper is thick enough that I can just handle it. So this is, you can see as it's drying, it's definitely much more saturated black. Now it becomes about this portrait. I think the colors work a bit better. The shadows, the highlights, we don't have to worry about black. And we have black, so we know what that would look like. And now you're focused on the highlights. Even the white becomes a color, which is cool. So we're going to let this dry out on the left side. And hopefully this, our marks kind of fade away. And we're going to start to switch over. We'll throw it in the scanner bed, take a quick scan of it once it's dry, and then we will get on to mounting it. So I think there's a little bit. I was happy with it, and then there's a brief moment where I'm unhappy with it, and maybe it's during scanning. I think I add a little bit more. I touch it with a little bit more gold. Yeah, so I just can't help myself. This drawing got the best of me as far as like my timing, understanding when it was done or overdone. And that's going to happen. Drawings do that. You're going to know yourself a little bit more after every drawing. You're going to know a little bit more of the medium. You're going to know more about your subject. And you're going to learn a bit, about yourself. So this was one of those pieces. I think this, you can see from the texture, it's a kind of a watercolor paper. I think it could have been more absorbent, or maybe I was just doing way too much. But it did bow just ever so slightly. But I think once it's mounted, it'll be fine. I think the black helped. It saved, me in this one with a bit of black framing the edges. It pops really nice now. Those colors looks more colorful, and yeah, it's definitely a bit more muddy, a bit more worked than I would normally do it, but we've got a red mouth, we've got the tan kind of little orange man face. I think some of that's just from his makeup. I think it's some of the lighting. But he had that on the front, and then he had a little bit more of the peaches on the side. And then his hair is going through this wonderful transition of, silver, white, blonde. And then there's some shadows in there. So all kinds of stuff going on. Let's see it one more time here. And I think we just let it play for a second. So this is the final, and I'll show you the scan in just a second here. So the black really comes in, saves the day. You can see the scan. It does something different to the colors. But we have quite a painterly arm, suit. And then just gets, there's definitely some flat parts in the face. Gets a little wild. Yeah, it speaks to the kinetic nature of him and the movement. Could it be better? Yeah, there's probably other ones. If you want something that's like just super accurate, there's tons of other drawings to look at. This one is a little bit more painterly and a little bit more expressive with the colors and the overlapping and the mark making. So hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for sticking around this long. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Where would you have stopped in the process? But have a great one. Thanks.